Okay, let me now move on to the second question. What does Modood mean when referring to, I quote, a move from race to culture? And this was around 4 minutes, 19 seconds, 4 minutes, 21 seconds. It's also a pretty tough question. First of all, I'm assuming that a lot of you are not familiar with this, but to use the word race in the English language in Anglophone countries such as, Britain, the United States, possibly Australia, etc., etc., South Africa, to use the word race is perfectly fine. Whereas in France, if you use the word race, unless you hear certain things being said in the metro, in the street sometimes, like what ta race, that kind of thing. To use the word race in the French language is something people don't do, or people don't do anymore. They haven't done that since around 1945. Now, race in Anglophone countries is understood as a social construct, a social construction, not as a genetic, biological, pseudo-scientific, pseudo-scientific thing. In other words, when black people mobilize around race in the United States, they say, well, the Black Lives Matter, we raise an issue which is racial, we challenge the racism of the police forces, for instance. When they do this, they don't mean to say that they themselves as black people are, genetically or scientifically or biologically different from white people. They know that they have the same blood as white people. They know that their bodies are made up of the same cells, les mêmes cellules, of the same cells as white people. When they say that there is a race problem in the United States, they mean that that race is a social construct. Okay, so basically in the 1960s, Modood argues that with the civil rights movement in the United States, more or less led by Martin Luther King, the whole focus was on race. And then by the 1970s and up into the 1980s, and then later on, the whole focus was on culture. In other words, race is about what you are, inherently, intrinsically, deep inside, whereas culture are, all the ethnic, specifically cultural elements, like language, like ethnicity, like religion, maybe. And so a shift from race to culture is really what it means. But ultimately, as I said, if you see race as a social construct, there is not much of a difference between a move from race to culture, right? It's only the evolution of the language, but it doesn't really mean that that mentalities change so much. Okay, so I really sincerely hope that you understand my answer to this question, because again, it's a pretty difficult question in itself. There's a last reference I want to make about Martin Luther King being mentioned repeatedly by Tariq Modood. I just want to say that I have a problem with this. Now, the reason is that Martin Luther King's civil rights movement, of course, had a tremendous influence on immigrant movements in the United Kingdom and in different parts of the world as well. Now, having said that, it's very important to keep in mind that Martin Luther King, when he defended the rights of the people that were not yet called African Americans, he would call them Negroes, right? When he referred to the rights of Negroes, right, in the United States, as they were called back then, and as he himself called them, these black people, they were not immigrants. They were not descendants of immigrants. They were full-fledged meaning en bonne et due forme, they were full-fledged American people born and bred in the United States. They were trying to get the full rights of citizenship, right? Like the right to vote, the right to be elected, that kind of thing. But at the same time, they were not immigrants at all. Whereas a lot of issues that we have been talking about regarding the United Kingdom are issues dealing with immigrants that arrive from I don't know, from Jamaica, from India, from Pakistan into places like London, Leeds, Manchester, or Liverpool. So I think that difference is fundamental, and I'm quite happy that Modood actually refers to Martin Luther King, because Martin Luther King was a hero of so many immigrant movements in Western Europe. Yeah, that's correct. But at some point, he should mention the fact that Martin Luther King was never actually actively defending the rights of immigrants, because he was talking about African Americans. All right, so I think that's important.